Hi. In this series, I'd like to share with you some of my favorite lenses, and then maybe share a few images from those lenses and talk a little bit about um, the process behind those images, maybe some behind the scenes, and just sort of share with you some of my thoughts about photography and cameras and lenses. So I hope you enjoy. So today the first lens we have is a Nikkor-H 28mm f3.5. I'd like to show it to you. With digital cameras, if you're going to take the lens off, you want to try to face the camera down, and that helps to minimize any kind of dust getting on the sensor. You run that risk anyway, but it's unlikely that dust is going to fly up under there unless you're in some sort of a windstorm or something like that. So this lens I actually purchased off eBay, and it was I think I got it for $35 or $40, and it's an older Nikkor. By the way, that is Nikon's brand name, or the brand name they used to use. I'm not sure if they still use that anymore, but that's what they called their lens line. So you can see here, this is Nikkor-H, and I'm kind of manually focused here, so if I start to put it up there, you're probably not going to see it. But maybe I'll try some videos in the future with some different focusing and see if we can focus closer and things like that. But I don't really like the autofocus trying to search throughout the video. Anyway, you can see it's quite small. It's a 28mm, so it's a fairly wide angle lens. It's not considered super wide angle or anything like that. It's very similar in terms of the field of view to a 35mm lens. Just a little bit wider than that. It's really nice for street photography. It's a really nice focal length for portraits that show a little bit of the environment. And it's also a nice kind of walk-around lens because it's so small. And when it's mounted on the camera, it really doesn't take up a whole lot of room, as you can see. It's not super intimidating looking if you're going to be taking portraits with it. I know some people might be put off by a really long lens on the front of the camera and feel more self-conscious, but this just kind of feels nice. Because it's an older lens, it has a manual aperture ring here. Each click is one stop of light. F16, F11, F8, 5.6, F4, which isn't marked, and then the last little click is to 3.5, which is just a third of a stop. In this particular version, it's not too tight at the end there, but all the other stops feel very nice. The neat things about these lenses is, as you can probably see the aperture there. As I stop down, you can see the aperture close, and then as I open up, you see the aperture open up, letting in more light. See it from this side. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. So, it's also a manual focus lens. This is the focus ring right here. And on these older ones, they had these really nice sort of scalloped rings, and it really gave you a nice grip on the lens when you're focusing. And the focus on these old lenses tends to be very, very smooth. This one's a little bit dry, but I don't know enough to take it apart and properly oil it or anything like that. So I'm just sort of content to use it the way it is. And it seems to suit my purpose. I also love that these old lenses, they're still compatible with the new digital cameras. Depending on the camera that you have, it will even meter with the camera, meaning that it will be able to detect the light in the scene based on the aperture you've chosen. And this lens is old enough that I actually had to machine it down a little bit to make it fit a digital camera. Right here I had to cut a little notch, and it hurts part of me to do that, but the other part of me really wanted to use this with a digital camera, so I did it anyway. Well, let's go ahead and see what the aperture sounds like when it's being opened and closed. So I'm going to attach it to the camera body. I need to throw a battery in here. This camera body, by the way, is my old D200 Nikon. See it there, D200. Get it in focus for you. I think it came out in 2005 or 2006. And it's still a really good camera. Even though it's 10 megapixels, the images still come out great if you are getting your light right and you know how to capture emotion and moments and you know how to compose. And I've actually made some 20 by 30 prints with this camera body, and they look just fine. There's no reason you can't get great images with an older camera if you know what you're doing. So, got the battery in there. I'm going to turn it on. And if I use this, if you can see it, this depth of field preview button right here, it'll go ahead and open up the lens to whichever aperture I've selected. There it is, f/16. And then if I depress the shutter, it'll take a shot. The D200 has a pretty noisy shutter, but I kind of like it. It's a very satisfying thwack. Now, I'd like to go ahead and show you some of my, well, not favorite images, because I haven't had this lens really long enough to take a lot of favorite images. I've had it for maybe, I don't know, maybe about 6 months. No, maybe about 9 months. So, I'll go through here. I've got my computer. And as I go through these, I'll pop them up on in the video as a still image so that you can see what I'm talking about. This first image here, it was a self-portrait actually from January when I had more hair, and this is shot with this lens, 28mm f3.5. And I was doing some sort of a photo challenge that I've now fallen way behind on, but the first assignment was a self-portrait. And so I decided to try something sort of like almost like it was being lit by a candle, late at night. And this image is 100% lit with flash. So the light that you see that's lighting my face, that orange glow, is not from a candle, that's from a flash with an orange gel on it, also known as a CTO, color temperature orange. And I have it fairly low, almost to simulate a candle sitting on a table or something like that. You can tell it's low because of the directions of the shadow on my nose. There's also the chin shadow is not below my chin, it's to the side. You can tell that the light is coming from lower than normal. And obviously you can see the reflection of that lamp on the wall. If you look closely, you'll notice there's a second light, and it's carving out the side of my face and reflecting a little bit off of the piano and filling in some of the shadows. And that's coming from behind me, and that was a strip softbox, which just means sort of a longish rectangle, and it had a grid on it which helps to restrict the beam of light. And that one you'll notice is a little bit bluer. That had a color temperature blue gel, CTB. I can't remember if it was a full cut, probably not, maybe a half. But I wanted that to sort of simulate some soft moonlight streaming in. Again, this whole photo was shot with flash. It was shot at night, but there was no light coming in, and I didn't want to ruin the mood with any of the light in the room, so I turned off all the lights. And the ambient lighting was black in the room, at least to the camera. So once you pop your flash in there, you have complete control over the light, which is really nice sometimes. This next image is of a friend of mine who agreed to do some modeling for me, and this was actually the entrance, well, sort of a little window to a parking garage of all things. I believe there was a car and some trash cans in there, but I did edit those out in Photoshop, so it looks maybe more like a prison or some sort of industrial complex or something like that. This one was taken during the day, but we were in full shade, and I used a speed light up kind of high, just a bare speed light, and fired that sort of in a tight pattern down on her in order to add some drama and some mood to this. All the other light in the image that's sort of not on her is just whatever ambient there was from the overcast day. Or the shade of the building we were in, I can't remember which. So, that's that. It's actually a very sharp lens. Yeah, it looks good. It's a good lens. It's not my favorite of the older lenses that I have, but I do like it quite a bit. I find that it's a little bit hard to focus looking through the viewfinder because it is such a wide angle view. I do rely a little bit on my focus indicators that do pop up in the viewfinder. So for any of you who are maybe anxious about trying a manual focus lens on your digital camera, any of the newer digital cameras will show you a little focus indicator in the viewfinder, and that will help you with your focusing. If you're a landscape shooter, or you like to shoot products or still lifes, it's even easier if you have live view. You can go into live view, you can zoom in where you want to focus, go ahead and focus manually, and then you're set. You know that it's perfectly sharp. This next image is more or less in my neighborhood. It's probably walking to the train one morning. And like I said, this is a really nice walk-around lens. I like having, just carrying it with me. It's fairly light. Of course, the irony is I have it on a heavy DSLR, but that's the camera body I own. This was, let's see, this was probably shot, this was shot in still fairly winter, so it wasn't that early in the morning. It was maybe 7:30 or so, 8 o'clock, no, probably 7:30. but you can see that the sun hasn't come up yet, and it's still kind of pre-dawn. You can even see a little glimpse of the moon up in the top right-hand corner. But I love, this is called blue hour. I love blue hour because of the way the colors mix and the lights mix from the natural ambient light and man-made fixtures. They start to blend together really well, and you get some really beautiful colors. And I think this is the last image for today. This is a lighthouse. It's no longer in operation. This is also fairly close to where I live, and it's just beautiful. You don't really see lighthouses like this very much, but this was shot probably early summer. I think it was shot in the morning, late morning. It was a very stormy day, as you can tell, and yeah, I underexposed a little bit just to get some drama in the clouds. And looking at my data here, it was a 4-second exposure, so I know I was on a tripod for this. And we got some nice movement in the clouds. Again, this is with that 28mm lens. It's a nice field of view. It's not super wide, like I said, but it does give you some context. And, it feels fairly natural. It doesn't feel overly wide, but you get a pretty nice wide view with it. So, that's it. I hope you all enjoyed this. I'm going to be doing more of these for sure. I have a modest collection of older lenses, and I'll be sharing more with you. So, again, this is the Nikkor-H 28mm f3.5. And by the way, the H stands for hexagon or hexagonal. That's funny. I thought it did stand for hexagonal, but I'm looking at these aperture blades. 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm only counting 5. I don't know if you can see here, but hold it against my shirt. Those are 5. That's a 5-bladed aperture. Nikon was funny with the way they named their lenses. Not much has changed. Their naming can be confusing still, but for a while, H meant hexagonal, and it meant that it was a 6-bladed aperture. P was pentagonal, obviously, for 5-bladed aperture. So I don't know why this is H. I'll have to look that up and figure it out. I don't really care that much, to be honest. Maybe some of you do. Well, that'll be good night for me. Catch you next time. Thanks for joining me.